Okay, we got into the teardown of my 4L80 for the millionth time because we had a catastrophic failure. I drove this and I even boosted on it the day before. This is a miracle. I knew there were some issues going on with it and I didn't care. I drove it here. I probably put 30 miles on it in this condition. And it's hard to believe. Now this is a stator shaft tube that is normally pressed into the front pump. And it's been unpressed because I worked on an express van that had a converter go out, and part of the converter, as this engages the stator inside the torque converter, when the torque converter came apart, it just started kind of eating into it. So I pulled this out so I could size some sealing rings. I just use that as a tool for that. But I want to show you what catastrophic failure looked like. And this catastrophic failure was a snowball effect by all means. So if we go under here, under the old race truck here it is up here, trying to get it ready for some more racing coming up here in a few months, couple months. I love Circle D. They've been good to me. I can't say enough good things about them, but stuff happens. And this is their SFI 29.2, the highest rating SFI flex plate they had. They said on their site when you bought it, and they even told me over the phone, you can't break it. Well, folks, you can see I broke it. So I got a cat meowing in the background back here. She's not happy today. She's in a little carrier down there. Anyway, so what happened? That flex plate cracked, and then the vibration, the flex plate actually came back with the torque converter, slammed into the stator. So this is the actual top of the stator here. That's how a stator tube should look on the top. This is how my stator tube looks here. It's been rounded over and it's been taken down to the bearing, to the thrust bearing, bushing, I should say. But anyway, I mean, you can see it's been pushed down. Well, it's also got another problem, as you can tell here. There it is. So I noticed that the truck was having problems making any real torque multiplication at low speeds. I could not spool on the converter at all. And it just felt like the truck was bogged down. You step on the gas, it's just bogged down. Well, that makes sense because this was essentially spinning in the stator, and the stator had nothing to hold it. So the stator would not multiply torque in the converter based on this being shattered. Look at the shatter on this thing. That is some carnage. And just so you know, this kept running. I know, it's unbelievable to believe that it still ran. And it made enough hydraulic pressure. Here's a bunch of pieces of my stator that came out of the actual Circle D converter here. This is going back to Circle D to obviously get completely gone through, cleaned up, rebuilt. I lost my lockup in here. And in fact, I didn't lose the lockup, it was dragging. It was dragging so bad. And the reason it's dragging so bad is this bushing here seals your torque converter lockup circuit on the input shaft here. And when this breaks off, you have no hydraulic integrity anymore. And so you need a constant flow of converter feed oil to keep the clutches off the face of the converter. And if you don't have that, like in this case where this broke off, you will drag your converter clutch bad. And it was so hard, I had to give it some throttle and boom, get it to move. And I knew I needed to get it down here to my shop to figure out what was going on in the trans, but that explains why I had no converter clutch control, because I had a major hydraulic leak when this snapped. So literally hydraulic oil is fed between the input shaft here. It's actually fed in through Teflon rings here, right here, from the front pump. It goes in from the front pump, between these Teflon rings here, goes through the stator shaft tube here. And actually, I think on this one, if I'm not mistaken, it might actually be fed into the compartment between these rings here. Those stator rings there might actually apply this clutch, and yes, I believe this circuit here between here applies the overrun clutches here, or fourth gear clutch, and then this circuit is the feed oil from the pump that feeds the lockup. So if we were to apply air here, we'd see it come out here. So it's introduced in the pump here between this sealing bushing here, and then also this sealing ring back here. So it fills the tube up, goes through here, locks the converter. Or in the release state, that actually backflows through here. It actually just reverses the way that the converter flow works on this. Lockup is an interesting circuit on a 4L80, and it's got to be perfect or it just won't work right. Anyway, this pump is junk. I mean junk. Let's take a look at this pump and let's examine why it's totally junk. Well, it was a great pump when I started using it, but once it broke, put metal through it. The bushing doesn't actually look terrible other than there's some embedded, well, yeah, it does look terrible, but it's got embedded metal in it. But if you look at this pump here, it just ate pieces of that stator through the pump gears. This is not actually the set of pump gears that came out of it. I have some Teflon coated gears that I have to replace, but you can see the amount of pitting that would go through when metal goes through. These come out of that express fan I was referring to earlier. But that's the pitting that when metal goes through crap, they're junk. So not only that, you can see a step right here. This is the original level of the gear that we're looking to maintain, but there's quite a step right there. And that's a difference between the outer gear and the inner gear, and it's just worn in. The pressures of this pump have pushed this gear into it with the metal and act as abrasive and just sanded it down. Also, when you look at the stator side of the pump, so this is the pump side of the pump, this is the stator side of the pump, this should be totally smooth and it's not. We've got a step right here, and you know, you could, if that were still cleaned up, if this were fine, we could clean this up here, press out this stator shaft tube, press in a new stator shaft tube. We're just not gonna do that. I got another pump we're gonna be putting in here, so junk front pump. But when that happens, we get the joy of stripping everything down because there's obviously metal throughout this transmission. I'm confident the clutches and everything should be pretty good going through the trans, but we're gonna have to go through it, clean it, decontaminate it, get our coolers all cleaned out really well, and then we'll be back in business to rebuild back up. New pump, set clearances, new converter. Well, converter will be cleaned up. You know, you get the idea. So, catastrophic meltdown on the race truck. We're getting a roll pan for today. It's coming in. So the roll pan will go on there. And we've got our street shoes back on. We've got our slicks under the table over there. You can see in the distance. But I needed to have, those are way too soft to be running on the street. So we put some street shoes back on it. But I've got this trans here I got to put back together. I've got another 4L80 trans I need to build as a spare. I've got two more 4L80 trans cores over there that I need to kind of have spares too. So let's see, I've got 4L60, 60, 60, 80, 80. That's what we've got. Got a few cores, but man, when you make big power like this truck does, you got to have some stuff on hand because you're going to break it. And not only that, but you better know how to do it yourself, because if you can't build your transmissions with the kind of power I'm making, you're gonna go broke. Now, one thing I did buy online was this cheap copy arm here, or this fixture tool, but it came with a sleeve that was so loose it was a joke, and so I had to machine, or I found the right size pipe to fit that, and I made my own bracket that undermounts underneath the bench. But man, what a difference to be able to just move this around how you want to and build on it. I love it. All right, guys, catastrophic failure. What take is this? 6 on this transmission? A lot of people might say, you're doing something wrong. Well, the only thing I'm doing wrong is making too much power on it, or 12 to 1300 horsepower through this transmission. So anyway, also the input shaft, I think I'm gonna have to replace this too. You can see this is where it seals here, but I just don't know if I trust using this here as a weak spot to start a spiral fracture, because it ground up a lot of material here, as you can see. This is not critical per se as far as a bearing service, but I just worry that it will snap at some point. So I'll probably throw another input shaft in as well.